Good morning, welcome to the July 12th Ordinance and Policy Committee meeting. Present are Councilman Clunt and Councilman Tram, appointed officials Amber Phillips and Paul Jensen, and Planning and Zoning Director Kelsey Lutz. Paul, I'm going to turn this over to you. Council is looking at 3 different ordinances today, and I'll let you guide us through them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance 1057 is the first one we will look at. This actually was in front of council last week and was tabled and sent back to committee for addressing one issue, and that's what we've tried to do here. And so if council just wants to look on the first page where the green marking is, the question that had come up in front of council was whether or not we needed to make some change, since we recognized that in addition to asphalt, we could also be using concrete, and this 4-inch limit or 4-inch standard, whether that should be changed to meet the fact that we can do concrete instead of asphalt. So what I have done is I have struck the words of 4 inches of paving and replace those with permanent surface paving as determined by the city. And I chose that wording because it just leaves open. We don't know what engineering standards or other materials might be available and might become the standard for 5 or 10 years from now. But this basically just requires that the city will get a permanent surface in place within the timeline set forth in the ordinance. Otherwise, it is exactly as had been presented earlier, and so we would ask if you two would agree to move forward and back to council with a recommendation.
Brad,
I'm in.
you're in?
Yep.
Awesome, okay.
Okay?
That
Ordinance,
one looked easy.
oh, go ahead.
That one looked easy for you guys.
That was the easy one. Now we'll put them to work. Ordinance 1058. This started out, and this talks about the regulations involved in the cemetery. This started out as just a one provision modification based upon situations that had arisen this year, and a lack of definition as far as when somebody holds a funeral and puts several containers and whatnot of different decorations out on a grave site right after the burial takes place. How long should we leave that there, and things like that, because it wasn't defined. And so we went ahead and defined that, and if you look on page 2 under paragraph with the letter I, we added in the provision for a 14-day period following interment, so long as those are placed within the confines of the grave itself. And if they are, then we'll leave them there for up to 2 weeks, no problem. The other thing that it does, it talks about a temporary marker until the permanent headstone is in place, and so we've included that language as well. So that was where we began this process. As we were starting it, I had received some requests from both Chandra and Brandy that they had several things on their little wish list that they wanted to at least include for consideration in this thing. And then talking with Troy and Marty, they also wanted to have some input. So we got a joint meeting together and sat down and kind of hashed through several things, and this is the result that you see here. As long as we're on the second page, we'll start there. One of the big questions that came up was, should council at least review and consider increasing the fees that we charge? And so we've got those all set forth there in the bottom of page 2 and then goes on at the top of page 3. So I'll leave that up to you folks as far as whether we want to make any changes. We've got the cost of a burial space, $300 per lot. The fees for opening the grave are $400 plus sales tax if it's during the weekdays, and $500 plus sales tax on the weekends and holidays. We included a sentence requiring that these must be paid and the burial permit received before the burial is done. There have been some issues in the past where things occurred without these fees being paid up front, and this will help to alleviate some of those problems.
Do we want to have that? I mean, somebody that absolutely don't have the money, say the person they're burying does, they can't
Waiting
sign a
on
check
insurance.
yet.
So
Insurance
in that
checks.
case,
I mean,
they pay the funeral home, and the funeral home pays us. If they don't have the money up front, then the funeral home submits to their insurance and all of that, and then the funeral home pays us. So,
on an insurance deal, but if there's no insurance and they just can't sign a check for the guy they're burying yet, they don't have no money. We're gonna hold up a funeral over $400.
we have.
I personally don't think that's right. I mean,
Let me ask you this, Chandra. In the years that you've been involved with this, how often does that become an issue?
There was one time for sure that the funeral did not happen. Other times, it's just like your utility bill. You tell them that they'll be shut off, or you tell them they won't be able to bury, they find the money. So that probably happens 4 times a year, that we have to say we will not open or close without the money up front.
I mean, I get it, once they're there,
Yeah.
they're there, it's a big process to remove them, but how the funeral home don't make you pay ahead of time?
So what, let's face it, council is, you're in charge of the ordinances, so my question is, what do you want to do with this?
I mean, I don't wanna be on the backside of it and have to say, well, it was never paid for, we need to remove it. You know,
All right.
in the same sense, I could see where a family might not have that, and that, until after the funeral. You know? I don't know.
If,
But that was always in there before?
It wasn't, but it was always, it's the way we've done it, but it was never written, and so that's why.
The
we
yellow
requested
is
it to be
new.
written.
The yellow is new
Well, that's why I was
language.
wondering how
Yeah.
they.
yeah,
how
this
they got
was
divorced
added in
that
at their
before.
request to clarify, because this is the way they've done it. It just wasn't set out in the ordinance.
They've done that since before I've been.
Instead of the word fees, and I don't, is it possible to say arrangements must be made before the funeral can be, or before the burial can, just like you have, except for fees must be paid, arrangements must be made?
So are you willing to do that for the plot as well? Give them a plot, not knowing if you'll ever get the money?
Well, an arrangement, my mind is, you've made an agreement with the finance
Yeah.
office to make, when you're gonna make that payment.
And
then what
rather
happens if
than
they don't
being so
pay?
strict with this, I don't know.
Like with utilities, if they don't pay it, I can shut them off. This, if they don't pay it, what are we gonna do?
Finance officer has the right to make deals with the city of Monterey.
Has the right to do what, please?
Make arrangements, payment arrangements.
Yeah, that's, because that's what I wonder, like, okay, I got a life insurance policy, but it's not gonna pay for 3 weeks, okay? That takes time,
Yeah.
in my experience. And so if they tell you that kind of thing, you should have the ability to say, okay, these arrangements are made, we're gonna get paid.
If it's only 3 or 4 a year, I think we could make it so that a family could make an arrangement. You know, I mean,
What about
Okay, but
what are you doing with somebody that doesn't have family?
So that is covered later on in the ordinance.
It
If
is.
they do not have money, technically, the county by state statute is.
the county buries it.
Yeah.
That happened with my Aunt Stubby,
yeah.
okay? And
Where you sometimes,
Indigent.
you will sometimes end up in a little bit of a quandary depending on where they lived and where people thought their actual residence was. Not here in Winter, South Dakota, but I've seen a few situations where two different counties were pointing at each other saying, he's yours, no, he's yours. Nobody
Yeah.
wanted to pay to bury the poor guy.
well,
If they ever
my
clean
aunt,
out the train station in Yellowstone.
Right.
they're paying for it.
Yeah.
because my aunt happened to die after, my great aunt died after my grandfather, who paid all her bills. And so then I found out, well, you can, indigent, I think is the word, you can go to the county and apply for that.
Correct. And
And for $400, she was buried.
Yep.
And that include, but that might have been back when we had $100 lots too. But,
So I could understand on the open close. I do worry about if you allow them, if you give them a plot without the payment up front.
yeah,
That's property that you're
Yeah.
giving them. So to me, I would say the plot has to be paid for.
because if they're that poor, they're gonna cremate, they're not gonna bury. Awesome, I really believe that, because
Cremation's
it's,
almost the same cost.
It's very close.
Talking with Justin Nelson,
I don't know.
oh, no.
yeah, by the time you say.
It ain't $10,000 to cremate, it's like $4,500 or $5,000 to be cremated.
I think it's 6,000, 7,000, he said, it's creeping up where it's almost the same cost in our conversation with.
Well, it's over 10 now to be buried at the
Yeah.
funeral home, yep.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
don't know how to word it.
Well,
It's
if
still
we-
in the ordinance, but I
Five,
think we should
6,000
have
is
it
still
so that
expensive to somebody
the
that
funeral
can't
goes
afford
on if
three.
they don't have
Yep,
the
I
$400
agree.
before the funeral.
What I'm hearing is you want the language that basically says either they pay it up front or else they make arrangements with.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I mean,
But I don't want to say pay up front or make arrangements. I just want it to say, arrangements have to be made before. Now, arrangements can include paying.
Sure.
But I don't want to give them the option of not paying. Okay?
Which I suppose you could say to some extent that is what we're currently doing, because a lot of times it is the funeral home that is paying the fees.
Yep,
And the funeral home, we don't always get the check from the funeral home the
Sure.
day of.
Sure.
Sometimes it's a day or two later.
Sure.
So,
And the funeral home directs people, it's not like this step gets forgotten. I mean,
right.
they direct you at every single step.
there are a few times where the funeral home says, and they will call and tell us, we are not taking care of the plot or the burial that is on the family because of da-da-da-da-da. You will have to collect it from
Yeah.
them. And those are the ones that we've had the issues.
But I would think in the majority of cases, you actually have the funeral home making the payment, correct?
I'd say, when it comes to open and close, I'd say 95% is
Yeah.
probably from the funeral home.
yeah, I didn't pay for Sherry's, but I came in and paid for the two plots.
Yes.
Sure.
But the funeral
Plots are
home took care of the
typically
cost of.
They took care of the
city.
opening. Yeah.
Yeah, other than the ownership of the
Yeah.
plot,
Sure.
yep.
Well,
I like the wording arrangements.
so just say arrangements must be made and a burial permit received
Yeah.
before the burial.
I think that's a little less intrusive than
With-
pay or don't get buried.
Okay?
So, Paul, do you know, is that something that can go to collections?
No.
That was gonna be my question, can we file a lien
So we're just out
against
the
them?
money if they don't pay?
No, I'm not gonna say, I shouldn't have said no.
Who's responsible?
It's a question of who are you dealing with. In a lot of cases, you'll have somebody there that has the authority and you'll have them sign a little agreement. In In case of that, yes, you can take that to collections.
Because there's an agreement with that person to take it.
And that would be
Yes.
part of your arrangements.
That's part of the
Yep.
arrangements.
Yep.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I would
There
definitely
will be
make
some of
on
those
that.
people that are frankly going to be judgment proof.
Yep.
They know how to play the game and tell the collections people that blow down sand, you know? So you won't always win them, but
We should look up
I
on,
think that the majority cases.
on Maple Oaks to see if the county actually paid for the burial spot too.
Let's not put those.
Oh, I'm sorry, but that was my aunt.
I understand, yeah.
Let's look that up and see who paid for that, because I am certain that,
I can't promise you I have that documentation.
Yeah.
but-
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll
well,
look
I will
through
make that
tracks.
change,
That was
so
done after
arrangements must
2000,
be
I
made.
know that she died. So,
Now, let's go ahead and continue having
are
resolved
these
that.
numbers in blue numbers that we currently are
They
charging? Okay.
I highlighted them in blue just to bring them to your
Yep,
attention.
yep.
They have been these prices for about 20 years. Not saying you have to up them. In fact, I believe
Let's put
Troy
'em up.
has some,
CPI.
he's looking into getting a, Coliseum is not the right word. What's that word?
Mausoleum,
Mausoleum, Coliseum, something like that, out there. And then at that time, I think Troy and I said maybe that's when we truly adjust the prices, because we'd be adding in the price for what it would be to
My,
input into that.
my question to council and staff is, why would you set the rates by ordinance? Why wouldn't you do what we've been doing and set them by resolution?
You could do that too.
could,
Where you don't have to do anything, but the process, instead of changing a whole ordinance, you're changing a resolution, which clearly is an easier process for council and staff to accomplish in the future. That's the one thing I look at.
makes a good,
It's a rate schedule. Most of our rate schedules are going to resolution because it makes it easier for you guys to make a change.
So, how much of that empty area out there is actually designated for the cemetery?
As in what they're building up right now?
Well, the entire, is the entire lot of land from what I think is Nagel's to the north, is that all cemetery land?
I'd have to
It's
look at
actually
that.
cemetery, even what, I believe, this.
To the
right
south.
here, Jerry Fisher, Hayes,
Mhm.
clear to where there's a family that has a garden out there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
I was gonna
yeah.
say, I was wanting to think there was
I
something in
think it goes.
between.
North of the
through
county shop.
City land. and
To the county shop?
North of the county shop all the way out.
Yeah.
So
Austin is
there's,
correct.
it's a county shop, and then there's a family garden plot there.
Okay.
And those are outside.
It's
of
where we
the
put our
limits.
snow, is it not? That's on cemetery land?
No, we put it over back behind the racetrack.
Well, we used to put it there.
Oh.
The city used to put
Oh.
snow there.
Yeah.
Used to put it north of Nagel's, yeah. Okay.
So,
So my question is, of the 3,000 people that live in Winter, that most of which won't be buried there, okay, are we running short of space? If we are, we should consider more money, because we're gonna have to buy another cemetery plot or land.
I think that's a question for Parks and Cemetery,
Yeah.
Troy and Marty.
Yep.
But I think it's a good question.
So before we start changing the rates, I think we should know how much in danger we are of having to replace it.
I would say with the land that's unoccupied, we've doubled the cemetery.
Yeah.
Oh, my. Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think that that's really an issue just from my conversations with them, but again, I agree it needs to
The
be
cost-
them,
So the
but-
cost of keeping it,
The cost of bringing it up,
of keeping it up, yeah,
filling dirt in, first of
Okay.
all, it's too low. And you saw that those guys were hauling in dirt into the new section. And it looks like they need to again to get that area ready for the next
And
generation.
as soon as that's ready, you will have a lot of people purchasing. Because we don't sell anything in the Catholic cemetery. But there are a lot of people who want to be buried next to the Catholic cemetery because that's where their family is. So, in fact, I just had 2 people last week call while Brandy was gone, so I actually took the phone calls. 2 people didn't purchase plots because they knew that the city was getting ready to expand over to that side, and they want that area. So I think they will sell very quickly because they're so close to the Catholic cemetery. You can't get close to it now. There is no spaces available over there.
Okay.
Right now, if you want 2 spaces, you gotta go into the most recent edition. There's not a whole lot other than that most recent edition, so.
That next need probably isn't that far away.
Okay,
So I don't think you're wrong in finding out how fastly we are selling those lots, how fast the future lots are gonna go, and do we need to consider? I think you need to consider it
but
now.
that's probably not as big a consideration as the upkeep of the cemetery itself, the cost of upkeep,
Yeah.
you know, because that just keeps going up.
I don't know, an acre of land to the city of Winter is not gonna be cheap from anybody.
I'm sorry, what?
If somebody wants to sell, if the city would like to buy an acre of land on the perimeter of the city, it won't be cheap either.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Right?
Won't be cheap, but if you compare how many people that buy a $500 lot fit in that acre.
I was wondering that. I would like to know how many plots are in there. I mean, that's gotta be part of our, I would hope somebody knows that.
Yeah, we do. So I can get you how many lots are available, how many are currently buried, how many are just sold but
In an acre.
unoccupied. What?
In an acre.
Yeah, we could get that too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's plotted,
Yep.
so.
Crazy information. but
Coming
you need
back
to do it.
then to the issue that the mayor put out there for consideration, which probably makes a lot of sense. If we took paragraphs under rates and went through A, B, C, D, and E, and on each of those, just say those rates will be as established by resolution of council. Take all the numbers out of the ordinance itself and then prepare a resolution to go with. You guys be okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Brad?
Yeah,
Okay?
because either way, you know,
You're in
not gonna
control.
change them, you're not gonna change them every year,
No,
Oh, heavens,
no.
you know,
No.
No.
so.
But at the same time, if you feel the need to change them, it frankly, it saves the city a little bit of money when you change things by resolution as opposed to an ordinance.
So you would just have a line in here under rates that says, rates will be set by resolution of the council?
And
Let
I'm
it go
frankly
with that.
gonna leave the substance of the break, how it breaks down, I wanna leave that there for a reason, but we can remove the actual numbers and just say in each case, those rates will be as established by
Okay.
council through resolution. But I think we wanna keep a designation of what those rates are based on and what they're for.
So we don't, I guess maybe I haven't read it, but do we have a rate for buried on top of? Two in the same plot?
The
No,
burial,
We're gonna get rid of that.
What's that?
No, and in fact, we have one, but it's not in this ordinance, so I don't know where it came from. It's just what we've been charging. But then actually in this ordinance, it gets rid of that. They have asked for only 1 casket per space right now. That is what Marty and Troy have asked for.
now they did agree that you could have more than 1 cremains burial per lot, so to speak. So
Okay.
if you have a family and they're.
Because
all-
I thought we had it where you could be 1 plot for 2 people,
You did.
yeah.
And we
But
have
then
done
I think,
that, but it's very, very.
I think they have to know that in advance because the first one goes 8 feet, I think,
Correct.
and the next one goes at 4 or 5.
By-
Yeah, something like that.
It's
But-
twice as deep, so it's 12 and 6 is what.
Oh, is that what they do?
That's what I had for
I didn't
our
understand that,
recommendation.
okay.
And that's how it was passed on to me, and that's how we were charging. But when we reviewed this ordinance, it's not even in there.
Yeah.
But Marty and Troy did ask that we only put 1 per space now.
The only doubling up that occurs in case of a casket is somebody could ask if the family wanted to put 1 set of cremains with a casket.
Yep.
You can, under this,
My
but.
My
but that-
sister's husband, he had a wife, and she was cremated. When they buried him, he didn't get cremated, but the urn went in his arms,
Oh,
in the
yeah.
casket. How cool
Yeah.
was that? I
Yeah.
mean, that's an absolute cool thing, I thought.
Yeah.
His real wife was in his arms. you
Wow.
know. Wow, yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
neat.
is it, I mean, I guess what's common in other cemeteries, as far as the double stacking or whatever?
Yeah. I don't know. I certainly didn't research that. I was
I don't know why we
told
wouldn't have
it's
that
not
as
in there and
as
we
an
didn't-
option, but
They didn't want to put it in.
it doesn't
there.
matter to me, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want to have stacking. And so we've clarified it here. The other question that had come up on 55.04, I have scratched the word adult because the question was raised by all of us that were looking at this ordinance. Why do we limit it to only adults that are requiring a vault? If somebody has the tragedy of having to bury a child, they're still selling vaults and you still want to require them to have a vault if it's a casket burial. So I took the word adult out. And I will tell you that at that point is as far as our current ordinance goes. And so all of this below in yellow is additional new stuff. And we can just kind of thumb through it at whatever pace you guys want, but I'll try to walk through it here, and you guys stop me if we want to talk about anything. Spaces sold on the basis of first come, first served, so to speak. Nobody's going to be doing any reserving or holding based upon, hey, hold those 3 slots for me until next year and I'll come in and buy them then. We're not going to be doing that. Paragraph B, once the lot has been sold, it now belongs to the purchaser or that person's spouse. Now we go and require a actual written document referred to as a deed, but it doesn't mean it has to be anything fancy. A deed can be a lot of things under the statute. But we want to have a legal document of transfer if that family is going to sell the deed or transfer the deed to somebody else. And you want to make sure that it's by somebody who has the authority to do it. The authority to do it can come in one of the several ways. For instance, if somebody is named as the personal representative of the estate of so-and-so who has died now, and that person owned a couple of more lots that aren't designated for anybody else. The person that is the actual personal representative of that person's estate would have the authority to issue a deed and transfer that to somebody else. If the person that owns the lots is still alive, obviously they can still sell it themselves, or their power of attorney would be able to sell it if they're still alive. What we wanted to avoid, and I know this is something that both Chandra and Brandy were very much in tune to, is you don't want to just make a blanket statement that says somebody from the family could come in and say, give it to so-and-so. Because the next thing you know, the other family members crawl out of the woodwork a week or 2 or 3 later and start hollering because that person didn't have, quote, authority to do that. So what we've done in this ordinance is basically said, if it's a unanimous thing amongst the family, they can agree to it and they can sign it, and we'll work with them on that. We'll get the transfer made. But if it's not unanimous, under those circumstances, somebody needs to go get the authority.
I have a question though, because isn't there one person that is the authority of the dead person?
That's called the personal representative of the estate.
Okay, I don't like the idea of, if there's 8 kids in the family, okay, and you gotta go get a signature from all 8 of them, I don't think I like that idea as well as the
Well-
representative that's representing the dead person.
But what do you do if there was never an estate? If there's never been an estate,
A
nobody has
representative
been
of the-
appointed as that official
We've seen
personal
both
rep.
happen.
Okay,
We have seen, so how it used to be done is whoever called and said, I'm going in that space, okay, fine, whatever. We didn't even verify that they were family. That has bitten us in the rear end before. So then we said, okay, we need we need proof that you can be buried here, or
Right.
that, whatever. We had someone come in and just tell us at one point in time, this is my grandparent, they told me that this is my spot. And then they passed away 2 weeks later, they were buried, and all of a sudden, their first cousin came out and said, oh no, that was mine. So now we have to have some sort of physical documentation that says that. So then the question came up, what if somebody comes in and they buy an entire block, which is 6 spaces, 6 plots? What do they do? Because they want it to be them, their spouse, and their 2 kids and their spouses. Great, put their names on the deed. So for my family, I would put Chandra, Vance, Kaylee, Ethan, and Alex. Granted, we don't know their spouse's name, so I would put 2 under Ethan, 2 under Alex, 2 under Kaylee. So that is how we stay out of some of that issue. Doesn't matter who paid for it, but you can put their name on the deed. You don't have to have the name of the person who purchased it on the deed, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And that has helped us a million times over by being able to do that. A lot of what you're seeing here in yellow is actually what we're doing. We've talked about this ordinance a million times and it's just never gotten this far.
So we've tried to get the ordinance to do what needs to be done, and B, to at least have us complying with ordinance at the time we're doing this, taking these certain actions, and that's what we've tried to do here.
well, I don't see here what my brother-in-law did.
I,
The permission to take a cremated in your casket with you.
hang on, we'll get there.
Oh, is it here? Okay, I haven't read enough,
In
okay.
your casket, we don't have any say what goes
Now,
in
we,
your
yeah,
casket.
we don't have any say what goes in the casket.
Because in C, it says you can put 1 remain in a casket, but there would be 2 if I put my cremated wife in there.
Yeah,
I think that's covered, Brad.
Is it?
Paragraph C,
I'm at C, yep.
at the request of the family, spouse, or
Oh,
significant other,
okay. Oh, I didn't read the whole
may have their
line.
remains
Thank
placed
you.
in an urn and buried immediately above the
Oh,
casket.
no, not above. This was in the same casket.
We're not gonna control what's in the casket.
Okay, so we can.
And I
Oh,
think, I think it's covered by a burial grave opening.
Correct.
If they pay to have that casket open, they can put anything they want back in it. And
Very, okay. So it is, without being explicitly permitted, it is permitted.
It's permitted because the city's not gonna be opening anybody's casket.
Very good, okay.
All we're gonna do is open the ground.
Yep, I got
and
it.
Make them available.
Okay, very good.
Okay? Now, on D, letter D.
I found that
This
interesting.
was based upon what I was asked to include from our cemetery supervisor and the public works director. Said if somebody's doing just cremains, we could certainly put up to 6 in a burial slot as long as there's proper record made of who's where within those 6.
A whole family could be buried in one plot.
You could. You could.
Could
That's-
happen in a car wreck.
Yeah,
That
Oh, I
they all
never
go
even-
at
yeah.
once.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's a possibility, and so that's what I did. I drafted it based upon what they wanted there, and I thought it made sense to at least provide for that possibility. Now, on letter E, goes back to this issue that we talked about what if you got somebody that's being buried and the county's probably gonna pay for it, but we have 2 or 3 counties arguing whether they are the right county to pay for it. Meanwhile, it needs to get done. This paragraph basically says the mayor can order that it be done, and to the extent possible, we'll try to recover those costs from wherever they should be recovered.
Can we change that from cemetery workers to cemetery department?
Sure.
I just,
That
I think
makes
it's more
sense to me, yep.
trivial, but that's the only thing I didn't like there.
Cemetery
Should
department.
it, sorry, now since you brought it up, should it honestly say may order the public works director versus the cemetery, just to follow your chain of command
Sure.
that you have?
Yeah.
Order the public works director to,
Dig your grave.
he's not gonna dig the
I
grave.
agree. I agree.
But I can get that
Find
word.
somebody who will.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
the mayor may order the grave be dug. And forget about who's gonna actually do it,
Yeah,
because his order's gonna go to, down the chain,
yeah.
however you wanna word that.
Okay, we'll get that taken care of. Letter F. This has come up before. I recall having to research this a time or two. This at least clarifies it by putting it into ordinance. You only have humans buried in our cemetery. We've had people request to have their horse or other pet buried out at the cemetery.
Worse.
True story.
True story, yes. So this clarifies that.
Unless
Letter-
it goes in the casket.
Well, if you want to cremate it and include it in the guy's arms, okay, I can't stop you. I'll leave that up to the funeral home to make those arrangements. Letter G. Apparently there have been issues where somebody either tried to or might have even accomplished having a burial outside of the actual plotted burial plot, and it was actually where the walkway was supposed to be. So this clarifies and says, we're not gonna be burying people on the walkway.
Based on where the stones are out there, it's hard to know
Mm-hmm.
where is this casket, or where is this, yeah, because they're not even in straight lines.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yep. Letter I had a specific request to include this because apparently people have experienced the sight, the observation of somebody walking their dog and letting them do their business in the cemetery, which I find just offensive as hell, but apparently some people think that's okay. So we included in here, nobody's gonna go out there and exercise their dog. If you have to take your dog with you to the cemetery, the pet stays in the vehicle. So,
It was kind of surprising driving by how many people sit next to a grave with their dog.
that, no
And-
doubt, and might have been with the deceased dog.
it could be,
Really do see
it
that
could
all.
be.
Yep.
I drive by it all the time.
But the chances of getting caught by the cops are pretty slim.
Very slim. Yeah.
I got numbers to show they are a lot more active than they've ever been.
Good.
In the cemetery?
Everywhere.
Letter L was actually a borrow from another city cemetery in the state of South Dakota, talking about the authority to literally, if you have the wrong weather conditions or otherwise, you got the authority literally to shut down the grave traveling within the cemetery if need be. Under the most extreme conditions, you even have the authority to, in conjunction with the funeral director, but if you needed to, delay or reschedule a funeral because of the extreme conditions that would give you the authority to do that. So, I have no idea if anybody's ever actually exercised it, but this did come from another community's ordinances, and there was some thought that this made some sense to at least give them this authority in those circumstances, so.
You gotta be careful on the wording of that sign, you know, after your dog poops, pick it up. People will carry their dog out.
Oh, my.
Are you guys good to send this to council with those
Nope,
changes?
I thought there was a change we needed to make here.
We
Where's
can make
that?
we can make it,
Oh,
see
okay.
it at council
Oh,
if
yeah,
you'd like
but-
to go forward with that change
Okay,
being presented.
with the,
We've got one place we
gotta
were gonna
reword the mayor giving the order.
rewording the mayor, the giving the orders, and the other is to take the fees and make those
Into a
into a
resolution.
separate
Yep,
resolution.
okay, so you make those changes then, yeah.
Send it
okay.
to full council on the 17th with those changes.
I don't want Jeremy to catch me again, doggone it.
Righto.
Take that shit
All
personal.
right. Ordinance
He's
1059.
been nothing but complimentary of you two.
Absolutely. Boy,
He's
have you
just
heard
sucking
him?
ass. He wants something in the future. Let me
He
say
just
that
never
again.
wants to
He
be on
wants
this
something in
committee
the
again.
future.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, 1759, talking about modular homes and manufactured homes. Chelsea has worked a lot on this issue recently with regard to one home, and then she and I spent a lot of time talking about what needs to be done. She spent some time with the Planning and Zoning Commission, going through what they wanted to see done here, and then we kind of tried to finish putting it together yesterday to reach all of those concerns and try to make this a more effective means of doing what we need to do for the entire city. So the long and short of it, what I attempted to do, we already had performance standards and requirements for manufactured homes. I basically attempted to make it so that the same conceptual standards would apply to both, your modulars as well as the manufactured homes. Mainly looking at such things as a foundation. In addition to a foundation, also making sure that you're not going to have some sort of, shall we say, temporary skirting around the base of the unit in one of your zoned family, single or double residential areas. So we wanted a standard that would require that in either event, in addition to being on footings and on a foundation, that even if the foundation that carries the load is not along the exterior walls, you also want to require that that area where the skirting otherwise would be is going to require the block and, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mortar.
The mortar, thank you. The block and mortar around the exterior, so you seal that up. We've got a requirement so that you don't end up with such things as your corrugated roofing steel and things like that, or corrugated metal on the sidewalls. We bring those into so that the roofing products are regular residential roofing products, whether they be shingles on top of your asphalt paper, or are you going to go more with the modern colored steel? So this provides for either of those. It makes a specific provision to prohibit skirting and then refers back again to the blocks. On the top of the second page, letter J, the decision was made to remove the requirement that the home have the long axis parallel to the street. Number one, there are some places where the home might otherwise fit fine in a particular location, and it might be something that actually will fit within the character of the neighborhood fine going through the process to get approved. But at the same time, you won't have room to go the long axis parallel to the street. So it seems like as long as you're going through the conditional use process for placing these in any area that's zoned for single-family residence, that conditional use process is going to give the planning and zoning folks the authority they need to make it so that they can cite it within the lot in a way that makes the most sense.
That came up, I'll just to preface you guys a little bit, governor's houses are considered modular homes, and they do have two different designs. One is where it would sit long axis, and then the other is where it would sit the opposite way. They make there's one up on Sixth that just went in last fall.
Yep.
That sits with it facing towards the street, not the long way. So that's a good example of what that front facing
Yep.
on that
Thanks.
looks like.
Perfect.
But that, just so you guys have an idea of why, because that wasn't actually discussed in the P and Z meeting. That was something that, when we're including modulars in this, and Paul and I are going through this, something that we saw as a need, so. And L, Paul.
The rest of the provisions here of the next 4 pages are going to the individual chapters within zoning. Wherever this appeared either in permissive use, or maybe you might have had one of these in permissive use and the other one in conditional use. We thought it made perfect sense, with the exception of your zoned areas that are dedicated to manufactured homes or mobile homes. We really felt like we should just leave the zoning requirements on those alone for these types of houses. But for everybody else, for all other areas of town where one or both of these might become an issue, this requires that they can be included in those areas only as a conditional use, where they apply for, they provide all the details and schematics in the plan, and they come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's notice to the neighbors before any action is taken on that. They have public hearing, and it gives everybody the opportunity to participate appropriately, so that what works in one neighborhood may not work in the other neighborhood.
And this is because there's such a wide range of what qualifies as a modular home. The example that I've been working on, the one that had the skirting issues that we covered a little bit, is a modular home. A custom touch home is a modular home. A governor's house is a modular home.
There are a lot
So
of
that,
them. A lot
this
of
is to
them.
ensure that we don't allow something that isn't gonna fit the specs of the neighborhood.
Yeah, yep.
So I would question the benefit that we have of giving a conditional use permit to a manufactured home in a residential district.
Those were already listed as conditional uses so
That-
those, the
that
only
we
one
can,
that
it
it
says.
actually changed in is that ag district, I think.
Because won't that lower the values of the existing stick-built homes in that neighborhood?
The answers are very clearly possible, yes.
Okay.
Maybe.
So why would we want that to be a possibility to let somebody bring a trailer house in on a lot next to mine.
Except we're not talking trailer house,
Well, that's what a manufactured home is.
A HUD home.
a HUD home.
A HUD home is, you can call it a trailer house, a manufactured.
But the difference is between it is
Trust
the
me, I've gotten an
steel
education
framework-
here, Les.
the steel framework that a manufactured home is built on, as opposed to the real framework that a modular home is built on, brought in on a truck.
Right.
Doesn't have axles, doesn't have the steel girders down the center, that's how you
To
level and mount the house.
I think, I know where you're going with this, and Brad, I've had conversations with different members of Chelsea's board. They would actually like the conditional use of manufactured removed from R1 and R2. They think modular
I agree.
fits in R1, R2 with a conditional use, but they would like the manufactured or HUD homes that you're referencing to not be a possibility in R1, R2 as a conditional. They would like to see you strike that and maintain them in the MH1, MH2
Correct,
zones.
because we have
That's-
places for those. Yeah.
That's what they want. They would like to see you as a council take that step to
Why aren't we
eliminate.
being presented with that then?
I didn't know that.
Chelsea didn't know that. These are conversations that have
I was gonna
happened.
say, I wasn't aware of this either. I'm sitting here.
Because I'm concerned about, and that's what planning and zoning is for, is to protect
Yep.
those that are.
So in the
Okay.
last 24, 48 hours since your meeting, 24, I've spoke with another 3 members of P and Z. They feel that if it's a conditional use, their hands are tied. They completely agree after this conversation, and I heard it was an incredible meeting by them, that modular is now defined. We allow a conditional use for modular, and manufactured be taken off the conditional use and placed strictly in the MH1, MH2 zones, which fits your
Yep, that's what I'm
discussion
saying,
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Okay, we can do that.
I think a lot of it though is what you do with it, like as you're changing the foundation. I mean, there's homes that
Sorry.
look, I mean, you can make a modular or a double wide or anything completely look like a ranch style house.
Sure.
Put it on the correct foundation. You know, I mean, I think if you're gonna really change something, I'd stiffen up once it's there, what you have to do. You know, cause it really is. I mean,
And
you know what
I
I'm
agree with
saying?
you,
I
Austin.
mean,
Like some of those Eisman houses up in Pier, like you wouldn't be able to tell it's a
if you go
trailer
look at my
house,
My
honestly.
house is a double wide, and
Yep.
the way I redid it and put it on a basement, it looks like a ranch style house.
Sure.
And it fits the conformity of the neighborhood,
Right.
which is that zone.
most of that neighborhood is,
That's why
Range
we
style,
created
yeah.
those zones.
Yeah.
And the big thing that they're talking about is the conformity of the neighborhood, which then affects property values of everybody in that neighborhood. There's a true standard
yeah, because
in
think
the
of 10th Street.
MH1,
Put
MH2
a
zone.
manufactured home on 10th Street and try to get by with it.
Well, and I think that's part of where conditional use comes in. I mean, if it's still listed on a conditional use.
They
we
really
still
feel that
have
if
a-
it's there,
If it's a
It ties-
conditional use, it's
Okay.
pick and choose.
it is, and they
Yeah.
don't want that.
Right.
They really want
Okay.
true lineation here of the standards. I can think of examples of homes on a 10th Street that are modular that fit in completely with the conformity of the neighborhood.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Because they were put on a basement or
Yep.
a solid
But that's what
foundation.
I'm saying, is it's how, it's,
But it becomes,
it depends on what you do with it.
when it comes to the manufacturing, the manufactured HUD homes, if it's there as a conditional use, they feel that if they deny it, they would be considered discriminatory, where if it was in ordinance that it was stick-built or modular, it just removes that responsibility from them of picking and choosing.
Yeah.
So then would you have to redo your zoning
No,
a little bit more?
no.
Because like, I think of West 10th, absolutely it fits in on West 10th. But you look at East 10th, when you've got all those big houses on the golf course, it doesn't fit in, but
But
yet
there,
they're zoned the
that's
exact
actually the
same.
direction I was thinking, that there are some homes
On
that-
West 10th, okay.
east
East.
There's
Yeah,
modulars.
sorry.
that fit in.
There's modulars that 100% do, and they
But there's
want.
no manufactured.
There's no
homes.
manufacturer.
Right.
But the modulars, they want there as a conditional use.
But a modular home is typically set on a solid foundation or a
Yes.
basement.
Yes.
You know, the custom touch homes almost always. on a
Superior,
basement.
custom touch,
Yeah,
the governor's homes
Yeah.
would still be considered
correct.
as, so they
But they're
would,
not manufactured homes, they are modular.
Modular.
that is correct.
The difference being the frame structure of how they're built.
And that's what they would like from council. That's the one thing that they just feel like they shouldn't even have that as an option
I don't
based
think
on our
manufactured
zoning.
homes should be part of the conditional use.
Okay, so if.
That's just my opinion.
Well, what I'm hearing, it sounds to me like you and the Planning and Zoning Commission are probably in agreement on that.
If our purpose is to enhance
Yep,
home values in the city of Winter,
yep. So
okay, for the
here's
same
my,
reason as keeping,
so here's my,
certain
here's
things
my
up.
question for you now. Understanding this, because this is good information, this is stuff that 48 hours ago Chelsea and I didn't have.
Did not.
You had some great information, good discussions there that helps really to clarify this for us. So if I come back on all of these pages and anything to do with an R
Or one or
classification,
two.
we get rid of the manufactured homes within those residential areas and leave those only in the MH zoning areas. We allow
'Cause we do have-
modulars
yeah.
as conditional use in those areas.
Yes.
With those two changes, in addition to what's already here, then I think, unless you tell me otherwise, I think we're about where we need to be.
So what's just a brief description, difference between a manufactured and a modular?
the framework.
It's, by state definition, it's literally whether or not the chassis is still is permanent or temporary, by state definition. So it actually has nothing to do with framework, it's whether or not it has a permanent.
Floor joists, yeah.
Yep.
Axis and,
So you can take a trailer house or a double wide, and if you have the axles removed, it's permanent.
No, because,
by state definition, it's
Define
literally
chassis.
just the,
because those leaf springs are attached
I have it
to
in my
the
office.
chassis. Yeah.
But if they take them off and set it on a base.
Take the steel framework off, because a manufactured home is two steel I-beams that run down the third,
Correct.
dividing it into three parts, okay? From that steel chassis, you then have arms that go out to the edges. And on those arms, you attach your floor joists, okay? If you take all that steel out of there, you won't have enough support for the wood to hold the floor up. That's the difference between a modular home and a manufactured home, okay? So that's,
I get that difference, but
Yep.
what? to
take all
me-
that stuff out, you won't have a qualified built home.
What my point is if you leave that there
Yep.
for support and put it on a basement, who knows that you have a steel frame or you have a wood frame?
Fire control is part of it,
Yeah, wouldn't steel be better than wood?
no.
Steel will burn before wood?
Steel will not burn before wood, but you create chases, okay? Even the custom touch homes are built with chases in them. And a chase is just an opening that I can do all my centralized plumbing and my electrical and everything down the center of the home. Chuck Keyser's home out west of town, custom touch. A fire starts in the garage, and because it got to that chase, engulfed the whole home that much quicker because it's wide open with no stoppages from one end of the house to the other end of the house. And that's the problem with non-stick built homes. They're built for efficiency, which is why they're built cheaper, okay? And you have that problem that doesn't happen all the time. But in that particular case, the fire danger of a total loss is much higher on those modular built homes.
I hate to bring up this, but Mr. Jensen and I had a conversation yesterday in Department of Revenue. Can't remember, he clearly defines the difference between the two also, on how the value of that piece of, that dwelling is taxed. There's a difference due to property taxes also.
Between manufactured home and modular home.
Yeah, and I can't remember if you told me that.
I have that in my office too.
Yeah.
I can go get it.
No.
But there's a significant difference.
But I think on Monday, if we take this forward, this would be an interesting conversation that I think you would want that information there for staff, council, and the public when we get
Especially
there,
if we're
Chelsea.
thinking about
I think that's a good
either
idea.
including them or not including them in our residential zoning.
Yeah.
And I think every councilman needs to know those values of those houses. I think of the house that's, I don't even know what street, 11th Street maybe, the one that's the end of Lamro and then you have to turn right or turn west. Okay, there was that mobile home, modular home there that absolutely fell apart.
That was
For years.
manufactured.
Manufactured home, okay.
Yeah.
Trailer house.
Yes. HUD home.
It fell apart and sat there for 5, 6, 7 years as a fall apart house. Now, somebody bought it and they put new siding on it, but it's still a less value manufactured home. What is the value of the house next to it? And how is that trailer house affected the neighbor's value?
I can tell you the houses on that street aren't cheap.
So modular has steel frame.
We can't use names,
No.
so I'm not.
The only.
I'm using
Try-
Very good,
the
Council.
manufactured-
Cannot even
The only
use your
difference
name.
is the permanent chassis or the temporary. So modular has the temporary, where it has to be removed. There's not gonna be any axles, wheels, anything, any hitch or anything like that underneath.
Basically, if, once it's placed,
Permanent, yeah.
my understanding is if the wheels and the chassis can be put back on and it can be rolled off, it's manufactured. It doesn't happen with the modular, I'm told. Actually, this conversation goes back 6 years, based on a homeowner's discussion with the bank. And once the value of that modular changes, once it's placed in that temporary chassis comes on, you're not gonna move it. It's on a permanent foundation also. I know you have the option, Councilman Clint, Austin, I know there's and you can do a lot with them. Grew up in a HUD home when I was younger and did a lot with it. But I think if you listen to P&Z, and maybe we should all attend and listen to what their concerns on, because over the years they've been approached and they just feel that they don't have an option, that if it's conditional, it's there. But if you stick to those MH1, MH2 zones or other, and it fits the conformity of the neighborhood, that was one of the biggest things that I heard in those 3 conversations, conformity.
Which I think that's where your option should be there, is if it fits what could possibly be around you. I mean, why do we have a conditional use permit for too tall of a fence?
Well, in the-
Sometimes you have to put some weight on your shoulders, and make a decision.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
I mean, if we're
And we
gonna
find
set
out that
up
the more,
ordinance with no conditional use, do we need planning and zoning committee?
interesting,
So
I
other
mean, it
than,
really does. There are certain things, like it or not, that are base by base decision.
right? And they're asking for modular to be the base by base coming in, not the manufactured,
Right.
is what planning and zoning is
But
asking.
but I think you make a good point for at least some references in the past have clearly looks like somebody was avoiding making any kind of a judgment call.
And they just
on anything.
allowed it. They just said it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And
Across the board allowed it, whereas with conditional use, it's specifically designed to make it so that the person that wants that conditional use can come in and sell the idea and show why it's a benefit not only to their property, but to the neighborhood as well. And then the board gets a chance to look at that and say, thumbs up or thumbs down.
And the neighbors have an option.
Yeah, the neighbors.
But they
have an
choose not
option.
to speak up. They leave it on their
they want to
representatives.
be neighbors,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
But you gotta look, and I'm not throwing the weight on their shoulders, but they make a recommendation, these 6 people vote on it.
That's
Right.
exactly right.
It's a
I'm gonna throw a flip side to this coin at you, because I appreciated your point, but also I've heard, why do we even have zones then? Why did we zone winter if we're not gonna live by our zones?
Yeah.
So Chelsea, let me ask
So-
you this, how many, MH1, okay, how many, other than the 2 obvious trailer courts, are there other areas?
There's 2 other areas.
Can you tell me like what streets they're on, or is that allowed?
So,
Yeah,
so First Dakota, Iowa, Liberty over there.
the northwest corner of
Yep.
winter.
Okay,
And then,
Mathis, actually Mathis Edition is zoned that way.
That's right.
Along,
Mathis out here,
yep,
Yeah.
so that he can have a manufactured
Manufactured
home
home,
Yep.
yes.
brought in, take the wheels off, set it on a
yep.
and
So-
also the northeast corner of winter.
northeast, okay.
There's also a small portion over,
By the pet
across the
wash.
street from the electric shop.
Oh, okay.
Austin,
yeah,
where are
yep,
you pointing
Yep,
out?
that,
Across from the pet
Right.
wash.
yep, I
Yep.
agree, I
Yep.
agree, where
Yep.
Kuchar has, or, I'm sorry.
There's one north of the old Outlaw also.
Yep, there's like
Yep.
3 houses there, 3 mobile homes.
Correct.
Sorry, I gotta take this.
I knew we were gonna go 9:15, that's why I rushed along the graves, but
Yep.
the counterpoint is, why do we
I'm
adopt the
Just leaving a
zones
meeting right now.
if we're not gonna
Copy?
stick to the zones, and that's why they asked about that.
Well, I-
Modulars even
I've got the pump in there, so
outside
it
the
should be
R1,
okay. But
R2
I'll be right there,
requirements
yep.
for the rest. And
Yeah, it'll take me that long.
They would like to see those there,
I'll
but-
get it, I'll make sure the pump's running.
not the HUD.
Okay.
And
Right.
I totally get the zoning and stuff like that, but it, I don't know, a few years ago, we talked about it too, that depending on what you're going to do, your drive-by appearance makes a difference too.
That's the conformity, yeah.
And, I guess that's where if you completely take conditional use out, your drive-by, I mean, it just. There are lots of all over now
Let me just
somebody's
make-
willing to bring something in and make it look nice.
Yeah, but let me just make a hypothetical example that hopefully this will make sense for everybody. Let's assume that we have a home that qualifies as a modular home, that under current ordinance is a permissive use in a residential area. So we have the modular home coming into as a permissive use into the current existing residential area. And as long as they put down some footings into the ground below the frost line and set it up and hook it, basically attach it then to that foundation, they can put skirting around it, and they're legal under current ordinance. if in fact you flip one thing and take it from permissive use and put it into conditional use, it would give the folks on the Planning and Zoning Commission the authority to make recommendations to city council, and it would give city council the final authority at deciding, you know what, we're not going to allow that under conditional use unless you do this, this, and this in order to bring it up to the standards of what the rest of the neighborhood has. That's the real value of having the conditional use, is that it lets you really protect the character of the neighborhood, and still, if they can meet those qualifications, it allows you to approve things that
I
otherwise.
think all that conditional use does is transfer the responsibility from the people that are supposed to have it to the people that don't have it. And from the planning commission, who are supposed to say, no, this is against
to
the
the
ordinance, and let's take it to council and let them be the jackasses.
And how often, quite honestly, Brad, you've been here how many years?
Who cares?
Well, you have 9 years, 10 years public service now, and we've seen how many conditional uses during our term come,
Lots.
and how many has council ever
None.
went against the, whatever P and Z? We've always
But-
deferred.
Until 6 months ago, maybe longer than that, maybe, I was of the opinion that if the planning commission did all the research of does this fit, who are we to override people that we have hired to make those decisions? And then it was brought to my attention that it's my job to override their decision.
They're a board.
Okay.
And you're a
so-
representative.
But
Yeah.
I was always, because when my cousin was on it, who was I when I was gonna, I don't agree with you, so I'm voting against what you did the work on. And I didn't do any work on it.
But they put a lot of hard work into this.
I agree.
Oh, yeah.
So if we have a planning commission, they should either make the decision or not. Conditional use lets them not make a decision.
They're asking you to take that one conditional use out.
Yeah. But then
Should make for
then you get into the what ifs.
lively discussion with council.
Yes.
I'll look forward to it.
Wish I knew the answer, but, because what if somebody comes up with a great idea to put a mobile home next to my house, you know? I don't know. I do know this, though, when you try to refinance your house, the refinancing companies look at the houses next to you and what is their value to determine how much money they'll loan you on your house. So
Comp
if
sale.
I